Not all prophets stand in a pulpit. This is the case with Ta-Nehisi Coates, who just dropped a piece entitled Charlie Kirk Redeemed, A Political Class Finds Its Lost Cause on VanityFair.com. His subtitle is By Ignoring the Rhetoric and the Actions of the Turning Point USA founder, pundits and politicians are sanitizing his legacy. I do recommend that you go over and read it. I will be reading much of the article here as we discuss it, because I really want to show you not only, well, you don't need me to show you the brilliance of Ta-Nehisi Coates, but I kind of want to show you what this brother did in this article. What he did was to juxtapose what's being done with Charlie Kirk's The Redemption arc, the beautiful eulogies that are being written for him. In particular, he calls out Ezra Klein in the very first paragraph, and we'll get to that in a moment. But it's all captured in the title, which is an absolutely beautiful juxtaposition. The redemption of Charlie Kirk juxtaposed with the lost cause. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with the lost cause is a myth that reframes the Confederacy not as a treasonous rebellion against the United States of America in order to preserve slavery, but as this noble fight for honor and states' rights and tradition. And this is exactly what we experience today when anyone talks about the Confederacy. They say it wasn't about slavery, it was about heritage. And by erasing the explicit pro-slavery context and the words and the action, they romanticize and elevate gallant imagery of all of their heroes. This is why you have Confederate monuments all across this country. It excused the white supremacy and it laid the very groundwork for Jim Crow, as well as what we're experiencing in 2025. And Ta-Nehisi Coates goes through that exactly. And so I want to read some of this for you so that you can get an idea of what this brother really masterfully did in this article. He's saying that the same thing that was done for the Confederacy is being done for Charlie Kirk in real time. And he's writing back saying, we will not have it. Oh, let's read just a little bit of it and then we'll discuss. Before he was killed last week, Charlie Kirk left a helpful compendium of words, ones that would greatly aid those who sought to understand his legacy and import. It is somewhat difficult to match these words with the manner in which Kirk is presently being memorialized in mainstream discourse. New York Times columnist Ezra Klein dubbed Kirk one of the era's most effective practitioners of persuasion and a man who was, quote, practicing politics in exactly the right way. California Governor Gavin Newsom hailed Kirk's passion and commitment to debate, advising to continue Kirk's work by engaging, quote, with each other across ideology through spirited discourse. Atlantic writer Sally Jenkins saluted Kirk, claiming that he, quote, argued with civility and asserting that his death was, quote, a significant loss for those who believe engagement can help bridge disagreements. The mentions of debate and engagement are references to Kirk's campus tours, during which he visited various colleges to take on whoever come may. That this aspect of Kirk's work would be so attractive to writers and politicians is understandable. There is, after all, a pervasive worry among the political class that college students, ensconced in their own bubbles, could use a bit of shock therapy from a man unconcerned with preferred pronouns, trigger warnings, and the humanity of Palestinians. But it also shows how the political class's obsession with universities blinds it to everything else, and the everything else of Kirk's politics amounted to little more than a loathing of those whose mere existence provoked his ire. This boy is preaching already. Second paragraph in, and this black man is preaching. Like I said, not every prophet stands in a pulpit, because this is exactly and precisely what's going on. Now, I don't want to read the entire article because I think that you should go over and read it, and out of respect for Ta-Nehisi's work, as well as Vanity Fair's publication, I'm not just going to, show you the whole article and read it for you. But I just have to say, the precision with which this brother Coates, has eviscerated this technique that's being used by Ezra Klein and others, particularly Ezra Klein. And what they had to do is to completely erase the words and the language that was being used by Charlie Kirk and the harm that was being done to so many other people. Now, a lot of people have said exactly this, but I haven't seen anyone else compare and so precisely contrast what's being done in real time on behalf of Charlie Kirk to what was done with the Confederacy. And then when you pause and think about it, you realize that's not just what they did with Charlie Kirk and the Confederacy. This is what white supremacy does throughout the entirety of history. It always erases and sanitizes the memory of its heroes. And it also shows that there is a unification that exists, because we're not talking about conservative writers. We're talking about liberal writers. We're talking about Ezra Klein of the New York Times, who has written profusely against Donald Trump. We're talking about California Governor Gavin Newsom, who has made a spectacle of mocking Donald Trump. And here they are facilitating the same function that many people in the Union facilitated with the rehabilitation of the Confederacy through the acceptance and participation in the lost cause. Brother Coates, let me tell you something, man. You make me want to preach. Good God Almighty. Because when we pause and think about it, black people and everybody else, I know I have a very, very diverse audience. I love all of you. But when we pause and think about it, black folks, isn't this just what they do? And even worse, they invert this practice when it comes to us. When Dr. King died, did anybody he didn't need sanitization, right? But see, look at the inversion. Look at the inversion game. What do? They take someone who has done good and they invert the narrative when they are alive. And then they double down on that narrative when they die or when they are assassinated. And then that becomes the banner that they lift throughout the entirety of American history. Let me make that plain. Just before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, he had made a personal commitment to vilifying the reputation and the legacy of Dr. King. It is a necessary function in American society to venerate, and watch this, here's the crazy part about it. We're talking about in terms of the Confederacy. And hell, it's a direct connection, because consider Charlie Kirk sponsored 80 buses to January 6th. So it's not just, it's not even a loose comparison. It's almost a one-to-one comparison. You had the Confederacy against which they waged civil war. Yes, that's a big difference. But the entire purpose was to undermine democracy on behalf of an ideology that itself is not compatible with democratic order. That itself is not compatible with democracy. What's that? The slave empire of the Confederacy, not compatible with democracy. And so they attempted to overthrow democracy. What did Charlie Kirk do along with all of the rest of MAGA? They insisted on ignoring the reality of their loss in 2020. And so they all sponsored January 6th. And we get what we got on January 6th because their ideology and their belief system is incompatible with democracy. Black man, thank you for this, because this really just kind of unravels and reveals. It reveals the reality of what this nation does every single time. And it's not just conservatives. It's not just quote unquote white supremacists, but it is quote unquote white folk who ally with white supremacy. They have no problem. Let me refine my language there a little bit better, because it's really just two sides of white supremacy. It's white supremacy that tries to use democracy as its governing principle, and then it's white supremacy that doesn't give a damn about democracy. They will overthrow it any opportunity that they get. But when you see the revisionist history, the romanticization of bigotry, of treason, when you see that, You see it coming from people who swear they love the liberal democratic order. But here they are sanitizing people who tried twice in American history. During the Civil War and the Reconstruction, and now after January 6th, we have people who are just kind of coddling the same white supremacist spirit that was here in this nation. Jason Johnson from MSNBC, I remember he said it on our show way years ago. I mean, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was talking to that brother, and he said this started in the enshrinement in the Constitution. This division, this irreconciled division between the hope for democracy and its penchant for authoritarianism has been the poison seed of American democracy in this republic since 1776. And it's because you have a brotherhood. I don't want to call it an allyship because they are brothers. And unless a white person explicitly rejects, do you hear me? Unless you explicitly reject the white supremacist power structure, the racial capitalist power structure in this country, you are going to find yourself like Ezra Klein, eulogizing, putting beautiful flowery words to the memory and the legacy of Charlie Kirk, but erasing the entirety of his harmful work. If you read Coates really closely, he's showing you the pattern. And here it is. I'm going to put it on your screen. It's the Absolution playbook. The Absolution playbook. How do they do it? Number one, they spotlight civility. They fixate on debate and engagement and the right way, not the record. So they shift the spotlight from what the person actually did and they go to their civility politics. Civility politics is like the opiate of the masses of liberalism. Oh, can't we all just get along? No, because most of white supremacy's history has been one of wanting to kill us. Number two, downgrade harms. They recast bigotry as mere views. Brother Coates said that this was open bigotry. This wasn't mere views. This wasn't just a difference of opinion. This was active, violent rhetoric that not only harmed people emotionally, but it was policies backed up by the full force of its Turning Point USA institution that had an annual budget of $140 million in order to do two things: to change an entire generation from having an inclusive mindset to being one where now college campuses are just cesspools of white supremacy. But that was just in college campuses. It went so much further. Charlie Kirk was a political operative that was able to get policies passed all around the country. And so by downgrading the harms, they were able to recast this bigotry that was active and a force in American political structures into just mere disagreement on the views. Number three, rebrand coercion, right? And what does this mean? That means that they would wrap calls. This is what Ezra Klein and everyone who's sanitizing Charlie Kirk's memory, what they did was they would wrap calls for force in concepts of the Second Amendment right. What do we mean specifically by that? That means if you take someone who has an active verbalized threat against you, and so long as they do it under the guise of the Second Amendment, then it's no longer portrayed publicly as a threat. It's captured and it is represented as being nothing more than Second Amendment rights. And who does that leave vulnerable? The very people who were targeted by Charlie Kirk and the rest of his get-along gang. Number four, Coates is teaching us that how they absolve these figures, not only the Confederacy, but they also absolve Charlie Kirk in real time, is they make the blame ambient, right? He says that they treat political violence as a virus so that authorship blurs. What does this mean? This means that it decontextualizes the political violence that happens every single day in this country and has happened consistently across the centuries, and it severs it from its root and says that it's all so bad. It's all it's a virus. Okay, that's cute, but you know what it also is? A direct extension of white supremacy and racial capitalism. And we can identify the purveyors of that violence as evidenced by the very study that the United States just erased from its database that demonstrated that white supremacist and conservative ideologies were the leading purveyors of violence in this country. So has it always been across this globe. The greatest violence, political violence that has ever been experienced on this planet has come from white supremacist, conservative, right-wing ideologies that is insistent on preserving their political and economic hegemony and control over the entirety of the human race. And Ezra Klein knows that. He's smart enough to know that, but he has to write so beautifully and flowery and to give a flattering eulogy to Charlie Kirk so that he can get a pat. Who? Ezra Klein can get a pat on the back from all of the liberal elites that think that, oh, we can all just get along and, oh, this is just a mere difference of opinion. The irony of this is, if you think about the fall of the Weimar Republic and the rise of Nazism in Germany, you would realize that it is the Ezra Kleins and the Gavin Newsoms and the rest of the liberal elite types that ultimately got just as much as everybody else. While they are coddling the fascism of MAGA in this particular moment by sanitizing the memory of Charlie Kirk, what are they doing? They are honestly creating and paving the pathway for the exact type of violence to be used against them from MAGA, because MAGA's not making a distinction between Ezra Klein and Gavin Newsom just because they are saying, oh, he was a good guy and this was a bad thing that happened to him because all he had was a difference of opinion. You think MAGA cares? It reminds me of Cenk Uygur of TYT when he put out the video last week and he was like, oh, this is so horrible. Oh, this is so horrible. Why would you do this? Why? Now, he was a good guy and it was just a difference of opinion. And he put out this real impassioned plea. And you know what MAGA said to him? You're just trying to save your own ass, Cenk. That's what they said in the replies. They said, we're not trying to hear you, Cenk Uygur. We're not trying to hear what you have to say. We're coming for you too. When you try to coddle white supremacy, it comes to get you. Even if it comes to get you last, it still comes to get you. And so number 4, making the blame ambient, that's a dumb move. If you don't make the blame of the truth, if you don't root the blame of violence in the truth, which is what? That it stems from the desire and the obsession with maintaining power at all costs by a small group of people who have demonstrated the capacity to be the most violent creatures in the history of the planet. If you don't expose that root, it simply comes to get you last. Ezra Klein and Gavin Newsom and Cenk Uygur, even though they probably come get Cenk before they come and get Gavin Newsom for reasons of obvious reasons. I digress. And number 5, omit the text. This is what my brother Coates, this is what he outlined. He said, I need you to see this pattern. I need you to see this pattern. Even any time they try to absolve someone of the evil that they did when they were living. Number 1, they spotlight civility. Number 2, they downgrade the harms. Number 3, they rebrand coercion. Number 4, they make blame ambient. And number 5, they omit the text. And this is what he directly said Ezra Klein did. When you go read this article, you're going to notice that he says this about Ezra Klein. Ezra Klein said all of these flowery words about Charlie Kirk. But you know what Ezra Klein couldn't do? Quote Charlie Kirk not a single time. Why? Because the facts, the truth is in every word that this man said and everything that he stood for. I'm not going to go down the list. Everybody is going down the list of all the things that Charlie Kirk said that were evil. Good. Keep doing it. But Ezra Klein having to decontextualize the truth of what this man said in his eulogy that he wrote in the New York Times really reveals the fact that He is performing the same service of absolution for Charlie Kirk that the United States allowed to take place in the absolution of the Confederacy and the romanticization of the lost cause. Number 5, omit the text. You build the legend without quoting Kirk. Persona replaces the record. Folks, like I said, not all prophets, not all preachers stand in the pulpit. But this good brother, Ta-Nehisi Coates, he has really nailed. I mean, when has this brother not nailed it? I think I might see a writing from this brother once a year, once every 2 years sometimes. And every time he steps out from behind the silence of his absence, he nails it. Charlie Kirk redeemed. A political class finds its lost cause. By ignoring the rhetoric and actions of the Turning Point USA founder, pundits and politicians are sanitizing his legacy. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe to this channel as we continue to do our part in the fight against this scourge that has besieged this planet. Let me give you one more thing. It has besieged this planet since before Jesus was born. I need you to really think about that. The Roman Empire, and before them, the Greeks. This European economic extraction exploit of colonization. We have been dealing with this scourge since before Jesus was born, and we've got to do something about it.